Hello everyone, Joel here. Are your mice surviving the relentless right-clicking? I hope so, because 2026 is an absolutely massive year for action RPGs. If you're tired of the mainstream AAA and just want pure passion of indie monsters slaying goodness, you've come to the right place. We're diving deep into the 20 best indie ARPGs you absolutely need to play this year. Kicking things off, we have Hero Siege. Imagine if Diablo 2 and the Binding of Isaac went on a bender, and this pixelated loot pinata is the result. It has a ridiculous amount of classes and enough seasonal content to ruin your sleep schedule. Now, is the UI held together by duct tape? Absolutely. Steam reviews will quickly warn you about the spaghetti code and server lag on season launches. But if you want a brain-off podcast on grind where you can just hold down right-click and watch the screen explode, this is your jam. If you are tired of the traditional 0 DPS pacifist runs and want something entirely different, look at Svarog's Dream. This is a beautifully janky dive into Slavic mythology, where you play as a lost soul hijacking different bodies. You can literally ignore the main quest to become a traveling potato merchant. The combat has that distinct floaty Eurojank feel, and the learning curve requires a PhD. But once you understand how the dynamic factions interact, it stops being a standard ARPG and turns into an incredibly deep, breathing world that you can completely manipulate. Tower of Kalemonvo is pure boomer ARPG nostalgia. It strips away the modern bloat, the battle passes, and the endless endgame maps, leaving you with a tightly focused, gimmick-free dungeon crawler. The art style feels like an old-school tabletop module brought to life. Now for min-maxers, the game may lack the infinite endgame loop of Path of Exile, but that is exactly the point. It is a fantastic bite-sized palate cleanser. You get satisfying combat, clever dungeon design, and you actually get to finish the game before you die of old age. Time to put on a ridiculously oversized hat with the incredible adventures of Van Helsing. This proves you can solve any demonic incursion with dual pistols and a bad attitude. The absolute best part of this game isn't the loot, it's Lady Katarina, your ghost companion. Her sarcastic banter hard carries the narrative. Mechanically, it's a solid ARPG with a surprisingly fun tower defense minigame shoved in the middle. The skill tree is a bit basic by modern standards, but the Final Cut edition bundles the whole trilogy together into one massive witty monster hunting package. What if Baldur's Gate and Dark Souls had a baby, and that baby hated you? That is Alaloth Champions of the Four Kingdoms. This throws out mindless button mashing and forces you to actually manage a stamina bar in an isometric game. You have to parry and you have to dodge. The world map moves in real time, which stresses a lot of players out. This game will absolutely give you the anxiety of rival champions stealing your loot. But that friction is what makes it brilliant. It's greedy, it's punishing, and every single kill feels earned. Before we go into the list, I want to give you my recommendation for some of the best deals in instant gaming right now, especially if you're tight on budget. We knew that instant gaming always give us so many crazy deals for your favorite games, like these titles for example. I mean, can you believe these prices? If you love RPGs, there's no way you never heard of these masterpieces, and to think that you can get them under $10 or even $5, it's an absolute steal. All you have to do is just click my link in the description below, start searching for your favorite games, and use the activation code on your chosen platform. By using my link, you're not only saving tons of money, but also helping me to support this channel. Alright then, let's get back into the list. Hell Clock is an APM check disguised as a video game. You are literally racing against the clock in a relentless roguelike ARPG where standing still means death. The combat relies heavily on iframes and split-second positioning. Because it's a smaller indie title, you will start seeing the same enemy types pretty quickly, which is the main gripe from the community. But the moment-to-moment combat is so ridiculously snappy and responsive that you will completely ignore the repetition. It's the perfect game to play while waiting for your friends to finally log on. Victor Vran did the unthinkable. It gave us a jump button. I know, an isometric ARPG with platforming sounds like a crime, but it works flawlessly. Instead of picking a rigid class, your entire skill set changes based on the weapon you have equipped, giving you massive build flexibility on the fly. The protagonist sounds like he smokes 3 packs a day, and the story is incredibly cheesy. But honestly, who cares? Especially when you can buy the official DLC and slay hordes of demons to a heavy metal soundtrack.
I'm currently without a body, so...
After being stuck in early access longer than most people have been alive, Secrets of Grindea is finally out. This is a love letter to SNES classics like A Link to the Past injected with modern ARPG progression. The combat is super tight, rewarding actual perfect blocks instead of just face tanking damage. The script is aggressively meta and constantly roasts RPG tropes. The mandatory puzzle sections can be a bit annoying when you just want to grind mobs, but the pixel art is flawless and the sheer volume of content is staggering. If you enjoy screaming at your friends over Discord, Heroes of Hammerwatch II is calling your name. This takes the roguelite dungeon crawling of the first game and blows it up into a massive open world. The co-op is absolute, unadulterated chaos. The early game is notoriously brutal, and solo players have the right to complain about the grind feels like a second job if you don't have a party. But dragging your deadweight friends through a dungeon just to steal all the gold is an incredibly satisfying gameplay loop. Let's take a break from the spreadsheet gaming and look at Children of Morta. This is a gorgeous, story-driven ARPG about family trauma and slaying monsters. Instead of distinct classes, you play as different members of the Bergson family and they all level up together. It actively forces you to switch characters, which is a great touch. Getting stuck on a boss means you have to repeat the same roguelite runs, which can drag the pacing down, but the stunning pixel animations and the deeply emotional narrator keep you completely hooked on the family drama. The Slormancer is all about making the numbers go up until your GPU starts crying. You collect hundreds of different weapons called Slorm Reapers that completely alter your playstyle. It is the definition of screen clearing nonsense. Now, the grind in this game is astronomical. It almost feels like the late game loop is just holding down one button in endless rifts. But if you enjoy theory crafting ridiculous synergies and watching millions of damage numbers completely obscure your screen, this game will give you exactly the dopamine hit you are looking for. Speaking of visual clutter, Chronicon is the undisputed king. Do not let the MS Paint aesthetic fool you. This game has more mechanical depth than most AAA titles. The loot filters, the crafting, and the passive trees are an absolute dream for min-maxers. You will eventually become a walking god, deleting entire screens of enemies just by existing. The graphics are the biggest hurdle, and it turns a lot of people off initially. But if you can get past the retro visuals, you are looking at one of the most mechanically satisfying ARPGs on the market. Radical Fish Games is back, and Alabaster Dawn is already looking like a massive 2026 highlight. You play as Juno, rebuilding a ruined world, and the combat is a frantic mix of Devil May Cry juggles and elemental ARPG stats. You get 8 different weapons to swap between, and it feels buttery smooth. Yes, their notoriously difficult Zelda-style puzzles have returned, and yes, they will probably make you look up a guide on YouTube. But rebuilding settlements and watching the world dynamically react to your progression is absolute magic. And since we are on the topic, we have to talk about the game that started it all, CrossCode. Leah's adventure in a fake MMO is easily one of the best indie narratives of the last decade. The combat relies heavily on elemental dashing, guarding, and fast-paced melee. Now, the dungeons are massive. You may hit puzzle fatigue because some of these rooms require ridiculous trick shots to solve, but the payoff? The boss fights are masterpieces of pattern recognition. It is a brilliant retro-inspired ARPG that you absolutely cannot skip. Grab your bolter, because Inquisitor Martyr brings the loot grind to the grim darkness of the far future. You get to purge heretics using a cover system in fully destructible environments, making the combat feel incredibly heavy and visceral. Is the UI clunky? Yes. Does the early game feel like walking through wet cement? Also yes, but after years of constant seasonal updates, the developers have turned this into a remarkably deep, feature-rich bloodbath that perfectly captures the 40k universe. It's the closest thing we have to a sci-fi Diablo.
Die in the dark.
Rising asks a simple question: what if an ARPG also let you build a ridiculously massive gothic castle? You wake up as a weak vampire and have to hunt down bosses to drink their blood and steal their skills. The combat is heavily MOBA inspired, relying on skill shots and cooldown management. The downside? If you play on a public PvP server, you will probably get offline raided by a clan of 12-year-olds who destroy your entire base. But if you play solo or PvE, it is a phenomenally polished, blood-sucking adventure. Astlibra Revision is the biggest anomaly on this list. It looks like a Flash game from 2005, but it plays like an absolute masterpiece. Made mostly by one developer over 14 years, it features time travel, profound existential dread, and a talking bird. The combat starts slow, but turns into a hyper-fast screen nuke simulator. The English translation is definitely a bit wonky, and the aesthetic is an acquired taste, but the progression system, where mastering every single piece of gear unlocks permanent passive stats, will absolutely ruin your free time. Moon Studios took the traditional ARPG, gave it a stunning painterly art style, and injected it with terrifying tactical combat. In No Rest for the Wicked, you cannot just spam left-click, you have to feel the weight of your weapon and manage your spacing. The massive news is that the 1.0 release is officially launching this October. Early access players have definitely complained about the punishing weapon durability and brutal inventory management, but the dev team has been patching it aggressively. It is shaping up to be a genre-defining title. We cannot talk about top-tier action without mentioning the Hades series. Yes, they are roguelites, but the isometric combat is pure, distilled ARPG perfection. Whether you are playing as Zagreus or Melinoe, the dash striking, the boon synergies, and the sheer speed of the game are flawless. The only negative here is that after playing Hades, the voice acting and dialogue in literally every other video game will sound completely terrible to you. It is a masterclass in making the repetitive die and retry loop feel incredibly rewarding. Finally, the undisputed king of the indie ARPG mountain, Grim Dawn. Built on the old Titan Quest engine, this is the definitive dual-classing experience. The grimdark Victorian setting is fantastic and the build variety is basically infinite. Does the game engine show its age? Definitely. If you zoom in, it looks a bit muddy, but mechanically it is untouchable. And the hype is at an all-time high because the massive Fangs of Asterkarn expansion drops in just a few weeks on July 23rd. There has literally never been a better time to play.